agree with you on that. I think meditation for me is less of the act of just like sitting there and trying to empty my mind. I think
Yeah,
it's more so just a reminder for me to sit down and have a conversation with God, but also let him speak to me because
exactly. It's a
so
one
much
way. It's just
right.
I'm open.
I'm
Yeah.
always like asking for things, right? Help me do this, like bring me this, all these things. But it's like, what do you actually want for my life? So I'm curious what your relationship with meditation is and, kind of how you incorporate that as a practice.
Yeah, when I first encountered meditation, it was coming from my achiever persona of like, okay, well, high achievers, high functioning, like I was obsessed with like human performance. I was like, I gotta meditate so I can regulate my nervous system, and all of that is true. But then I realized that meditation is just us, as you said, creating space for just listening. Like we spend more than like 85% of our day speaking, doing,
Mm.
executing, work, whatever it is. But we're not even listening to music, although I love listening to music, but just being in pure silence and stillness and just being like an open antenna to receive guidance. And actually, my retreat that I'm about to host in Costa Rica, which is an absolute dream for me, it's like dream co-facilitator with one of my best friends in the most like literally I dreamed about this retreat center when I first saw it, and I know I was going to host a retreat there, and I was in meditation closing my eyes, um and then I received a message of like text Joe and ask him if he wants to host a retreat. And literally 2 seconds later, he's like, yes, I've been thinking about it. And now here we are a year later, both fulfilling our dreams, and yeah, just starting a really cool um movement, like breathwork movement. So
You've been able to, I think, bring people out of like get people out of their own heads, get people into their heart, get people really into the person, into the version of themselves that God created them to be. I've seen that within you. You have a
mm,
gift witnessing some of your breath works, participating in them myself, and just the one where I didn't actually get to do it, but I just helped create the space to put on the event. I was able to witness people who were like just going so deep inward and having just these transformational experiences. And I'm sure that's got to be kind of heavy for you. Just, you know, going into that thinking like, I really have the power to change somebody's life through this one
mm.
experience. Was there an experience for you that got you into this whole realm of the world, got you into this work? I find it so interesting. People who are breathwork facilitators, help with meditation. Like, how did you get into the field that you're in now?
Yeah. Um, Before I answer that, it's not heavy for me. It really isn't. But I'll share more about that in a little bit. So I got into breath work first, again, from a performance standpoint, right? When you want to, I've been a runner for many years. It's been my first love since I never knew how to like lift a weight until like probably 4 years ago. And so I knew that running and breath work went hand in hand. I was obsessed with my heart rate variability. So I was like, okay, again, achiever performance, let's do breath work. And so that was my first approach. Then at the same time, I was going through a very dark period of my life where I was living in California, peak. I think we were like 2018, 2019, like the pandemic had just started. I was in California in a relationship that I was kind of not so happy with. It was healthy, but still. Um, and then I experienced a huge wave of loss after um, losing a pregnancy. And so after that experience is when I experienced my depths of grief, my depths of anger, my depths of guilt, unworthiness, like all the feelings. And one thing that I notice about life in general, and we hear this over and over again, but it's not until we experience it that those periods of darkness, it means that God life is preparing you for something greater than yourself. And so like your story, right? Is like, I don't know why this happened. And then in some ways, you kind of like you first like guilt yourself, like, oh, I made this happen. And then you go through this whole stage of kind of reawakening, rebirthing. And so breathwork became actually my tool to feel safe in my body again, to kind of like regulate my nervous system. And then over time, I realized that it was a really beautiful spiritual practice. So, what became a performance tool later on became like, okay, this is cool, high variability, nervous system regulation. Wow, I'm literally having like, I'm receiving messages. I am, what people call manifesting, but I'm really just co creating with God, with life. I am feeling so in tune with my wisdom, with my intuition. And it was through consistent breathing that I realized I need to move out of California. I need to end this relationship. I need to move to Austin. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what kind of catapulted my journey with breath work.
And when did you make the decision to make this your full-time practice?
That is a good question. I think I had always known in my heart. So before doing breath work, I was doing something completely different. Being an immigrant, you're either a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor. And so I chose engineering because the other two are way too long. So I became an engineer, industrial engineer, did supply chain for 5 years, and I just never looked forward going to work. I just thought it was something that I had to do and that it paid well. And then there was a breaking point in that same period of time where was dreading my Mondays. I was dreading my work and I didn't feel good about it. So I knew I was meant to do something greater. And I always knew that it was some kind of guide, some kind of teacher, some kind of. So then after receiving like breathwork training myself, I was like, you know what? I don't know what's next, but right now the whole world can't breathe. We're in the middle of the pandemic. The whole can't breathe movement's going on. People are literally, COVID was a respiratory illness. So I was like, what is happening? Like, there's no coincidence that I'm learning about breathwork while everyone's literally having their lungs flood with, because breathwork, by the way, breathwork was what supported me overcome COVID, no vaccine. Like, it was just, I was like, everyone needs to breathe right now. Like, that's the message that I received. And if I could impact at least my close friends. And so I started hosting free circles of like, hey guys, let's breathe. I know we're all stressed out. I know we don't know what's going to happen. Let's breathe and see what happens. And it was after those free sessions that I had people tell me, like, oh my gosh, I saw my grandmother who died a few years ago. Oh my gosh, I processed my trauma from X, Y, and Z. Oh my God. Like, I was able to finally let go of the anger towards my dad. And I'm just like, wow, okay, there's something here.
What is it about breathwork? Like, how do you get to that state? Like, what is the science behind that? Like, how are we able to like access these things within our mind through the breath?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot more to be researched, but there's a really good book called Breath by James Nestor. There's The Healing Power of the Breath. There's um, uh, Breathing, The Master Key to Self Healing, another book by Dr. Andrew Weil. So what we're doing is we're altering our state of consciousness. And all that means is that similar to the same way that we drink, I'll just say we drink alcohol, but alcohol is a lower vibration. It's actually really toxifying for the body, or that we consume any other substance that alters our conscious mind, meaning that prefrontal cortex, like rationalize kind of like all the stories that we have where we make decisions, how we execute. What we're doing is like we're changing our blood oxygen levels, we're kind of hyperventilating, um, really in a more non-science way where it's believed that the breath is our connection to spirit, that it's like kind of like the first thing that we do when we come into this world is take that first breath. When we die, it's that last breath. So it's really like the breath is the spirit. So in my experience, it's when we're kind of like shifting that altered state of consciousness that the unconscious becomes conscious. And so all those repressed memories, all those repressed things, come up to the surface. But it's not just bringing up to the surface. This is why I mix breath work with inner work, because similar to, nowadays it's very popular to do plant medicine. It's not just bringing things to the surface, is really into is what do I do with all of this information? So part of my facilitation is, okay, so that came up. Now, how do we integrate this in your day to day? But going back to your original question, yes, there's a physiological shift in your mind, in your blood oxygen levels. There's some people say that you can release DMT as well. I've personally never experienced that. I know Joe has multiple times. Um, and through that is that we are able to, again, make the unconscious conscious.
Wow. So releasing DMT through breath work,
Yeah.
what I mean, if you, the only real knowledge I have of DMT is like hearing Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss talk about it on podcasts, right? Like,
Yeah.
what exactly is it, and how how is it accessed through the breath?
So DMT is I'm not gonna try to pronounce it, but I think it's dimethyl I don't know.
You did
It's
great,
the
great job. That's
yes,
exactly what.
yes.
Now spell
Uh
it.
yeah, but it's released right before we die. Also nowadays, like there's a lab made DMT that people also play around with, but really it's like this powerful chemical that is released right before we die. And so in some ways, regardless of we believe what happens after death, we kind of become into this new dimension, this state of like oneness almost. And it helps us dissolve our ego or our identity of who we are, right? Like right now, I think I'm Michelle, like I'm a woman, I'm a daughter, I'm a coach. But when we release DMT, we kind of like that, it's called like ego death. We
Mm.
dissolve beyond that and we kind of become one with everything. And some people see things, some people see mythical figures. Like I had one lady in one of the breathwork sessions share that she saw purple dragons. And I was like, interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of mystery. You know, a lot of the things that and you witnessed that in my breathwork session. I was like, oh my gosh, Dom's gonna see all the things that really happen in this breathwork session because I can't explain it. Like I can't explain it. Every time that I enter into my session, I just know that there's going to be a lot of questions that I don't know, but my job is not to know. My job is to just be an open channel, is to be a clear channel and to be in tune with everyone and what everyone needs. And I really can't explain a lot of the things that people see or experience. I'm just there to hold it.
Yeah, the breath is interesting because there's so many different kinds of breathwork patterns for
Yes.
different scenarios. So there's ones that, upregulate the nervous system and get you really amped up and fired up and focused. And there's other ones that, you know, help put you to sleep, like a 4-5 or 4-7-8 breathing. Or there's just the pranayama breathing, which I'll do when I'm in the cold plunge, which I learned from my buddy Dom, who works at Plunge. Um, that's what the monks used to do. I think like back in the day to like keep themselves warm up in the mountains. So I just think it's fascinating how many different kinds of breath work there is when you're dealing with like the everyday individual. I think there's so much stress in the world. Like we're under so much stress on a daily basis. What is one form of breath work that we could do when we're feeling high stress and we need to bring our central nervous system down so that we can think clearly and really show up as our best?
Yeah, I love that you're asking this question because I think a lot of people seek that DMT experience because we're also like curious about it. We're just like, wow, I want to have this like blast off. Or I've had people in my breathwork sessions be like, well, I didn't experience that. I didn't see things. I was just breathing. And I was like, well, that's exactly what you needed in that moment. And I think a lot of us, especially now, we are chasing peak experiences um, rather than just really what's more powerful in a peak experience is to have a consistent practice that helps you tap into that a little bit of that every day. And so as you said, there's holotropic. Wim Hof became super popular, and I cringe a little bit when I see people doing Wim Hof every morning because that's a lot for your nervous system even before an ice bath. You know, it's like it's it's more common to see this more sympathetic kind of it's called overstimulating the sympathetic nervous system. That yeah, eventually leads to parasympathetic, but we're drinking so much coffee, we're on our phones, like, that's not what we need. I would say for the everyday individual, for the Western man, woman, and everything in between that lives here in the US or it lives a very busy life or entrepreneur, is to slow it down. And it's very simple. It's a deep belly breath through your nose, really expanding the upper belly area of the body. And then again, out through your nose. So, first, nasal breathing only so that you can increase nitric oxide, which basically increases your blood circulation. Also, it stimulates your vagal tone, meaning that your parasympathetic state, you're so relaxed. And so, what happens when you're so relaxed is that neurochemicals like oxytocin are released. And so, what does oxytocin do? It helps us bond with others and with ourselves, is what mothers release when they're breastfeeding. And so that is what we need more of. So I would say 4 to 5 second inhale through the nose, in and out, for at least, this is the caveat, 20 minutes. It's a 20-minute practice, but really, like, for those people that in your podcast are obsessed with heart rate variability, that will increase your heart rate variability like 100%. Doing it 20 minutes every single day, in and out. And just to take it one level deeper for the geeks that love data, because I love data, have an engineering background, there's actually a specific breathing pattern called resonant frequency breathing, for those that want to Google it, where you can calculate with your heart rate variability actually what is the perfect, because you have a perfect breathing rate based on your age, body weight, size. I have my perfect breathing rate. The average is 4 to 5 second inhale and exhale, but for you actually may be different, for me may be different. So you can actually like find your perfect kind of, like, in the Guitar Hero, when you like are striking all the chords and these things begin to light up. That's always, I don't know why that image always comes to mind. It's exactly that. You find the perfect breathing pattern that works for you, and it's really magical.
How do you find that frequency?
Now you're curious, yeah.
I'm curious now.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a whole test for people that want to like find out. There's an amazing doctor called Dr. Leah Lagos, and she partners with Elite HRV. There was a time in my life where I was obsessed. I'm telling you, I was obsessed with heart rate variability. I had the Aura, I had the Whoop all in one hand. I was tracking it every day because I was so fascinated by the breath and seeing my HRV going from 60 to 140, and I was like, what is happening? Of course, I was also running. Running really increases your heart rate variability as well. Um, and so there's a whole test. You kind of test, you go, okay, I'm going to breathe for 4 seconds. I'm going to breathe for five. I'm going to breathe for six. I'm going to breathe for seven. And then you have a real time HRV tracker, which is what Elite HRV has. They have an amazing, I actually have it right here. They have an amazing little thing that you put on your finger. And so you see which breathing pattern yields the highest heart rate variability in that moment. And that's how you identify it.
I wore a Whoop for a year, and my heart rate variability was 180 for like
Yeah.
a good amount of time. It was really high.
Yeah.
And, you know, transparently, I was in a relationship at that time, and I wasn't doing a lot of running. I was actually just doing I was doing a lot of strength training. But I was spending a lot of time with somebody who, meant a lot to me, who I was in
Yeah.
a romantic relationship with. And then after that, so like the 6 months after where I was wearing the Whoop, my heart rate variability went down to an average of like 100 or 110.
After you guys ended a relationship.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I was also just training a ton. Like that was when I
Mm.
started doing a ton of endurance training. So I was training for my first marathon. I was then after that I started training for a second marathon, which was, so I guess I worked for like a year and like 3 months. I worked for like 15 or 16 months or so.
Yeah.
But when I was in the peak of that training, I was running, 50-ish miles a week. I was strength training a ton. I wasn't sleeping a ton. My recoveries, I was just getting like so many low yellows, so many red recoveries. And I was so confused because I was like, just like you said, having a heart rate running should make your heart rate variability higher.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case for me. So what
Yeah.
exactly, one, like what is heart rate variability? And
Yeah.
you know, why was mine, from what why was mine high at a certain point? And then like what's the science behind like why maybe it was going lower? And I don't know, HRV is this fascinating thing. It's kind of like
I
a hot
love that you're
topic right
asking
now.
this question. So going back to the relationship that I talked about in California, for me was the opposite. My heart rate variability got higher when I ended the relationship. So first of all, people, when especially romantic partners that we're co-regulating with all the time. So think about like if you and I, even right now, we're probably co-regulating, but when you're like literally sharing a physical space, there's like science behind this. Heart math is a great science-oriented research center that studies the power of the heart and heart variability. You're co-regulating with that person. And so, if I had to guess, that person also probably had a very high heart rate variability. So you guys, your hearts coming together, you were just like amplifying that wavelength. And then we talked about oxytocin being one of those chemicals that we release when we're bonding. That also means that you're in a really sweet parasympathetic state. You know what I mean? Like when we're in a relationship that's really healthy and nourishing, and or in those moments where it's healthy and nourishing, our nervous system's relaxed, we're feeling safe, we're feeling connected. And so it makes sense that you were experiencing a really high heart rate variability when you're in a very healthy, nourishing relationship. Like that makes total sense to me at a physiological level. Now, I also have a theory that heart rate variability goes beyond your physiology. We just haven't explained it yet. HRV is kind of new, honestly. That's why people sometimes like say like, oh, it's not really accurate. This device is actually not accurate because it's fairly new. There's still a lot of research to be done, and so I believe that also higher variability has a lot to do with your what we can track, like the love, like the actual the electromagnetic field of the heart, your alignment with your purpose, your frequency. And it's a little bit more woo-woo, but it's like I truly believe that because I've seen some crazy heart variabilities from people that are experiencing um kind of like an awakening process. One of my really good friends, Scott Britton, who has another podcast, he was like, Michelle, my heart rate is like 200. Like, this is crazy. And I'm not doing anything. I'm not training. I'm sleeping okay. Like, but yeah, anyway, so I think there's like something that we can't explain. Height rate variability is basically what the variability that is caused in your heart when you're switching from parasympathetic to sympathetic. So you can think of it as like the accelerator and the brake. And so we're constantly going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. So, for example, right now, you and I are probably right in the middle, probably more sympathetic because we are performing. But if you and I were just hanging out on a couch watching a movie, probably will be in parasympathetic. We want high variability, which is sometimes confusing, but we want high variability because we want to be able to be like a panther. A panther goes, kills its prey, and then comes back to the tree, and then it'll lick its paw and go back to like a chill mode. We want to be like that level of that level of like beast mode of like, I just, did a whole marathon and now I can just be not stressed about it. Um, so that I think that answers your question.
Yeah, and
Yes.
what exactly is like heart rate variability from a standpoint of like numbers, right? Because I used to have people, I would post my HRV and be like, "Oh, it's really high," or "Oh, wow, it's lower." And some people would be like, "Well, my in if I'm around 70, then I'm in the green on Whoop." And I was like, "If I'm in 70, like I'm in the red." So,
Yeah.
what's the difference there?
Yep. So, one thing that I always tell my clients is I track heart rate variability for my clients that are focused on their health and well-being. Well, actually most of them. Heart rate variability is very bio-individual to you. So it's like easy to compare ourselves and be like, oh, Dom's at a 140, I'm at a 60. So that's the first thing I would love the audience to know is like it's individual to you. There is kind of like an average for the average male your age. 70 is great. um, Now an Olympian or an athlete would probably have over 100, 140. But heart rate variability is basically measured with the distance between each heartbeat. And again, so if you think about of a electrocardiogram, you want the variability. You want to be in a really high state and then go in a really low state, in a really high state and a really low state. So you want that distance to be different. Um, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So, I think it's just different from like resting heart rate versus heart rate variability. It's like, all right, yeah, resting heart rate is how many, like, what your heart's beating at,
Your
just
beats per minute.
your
Yeah.
beats per minute.
Your beats
Exactly.
per minute, and the heart rate variability is like the beat to beat variation. So how much time did it take from that last heartbeat to the next one? If that makes sense.
Mm.
That's
S-
why when people like have really low HRV and the next day goes really high. If people notice that in the loop, but it's like you had a really low day, but then if you rest well the next day, your HRV is going to go really, really high. But that's because there was a lot of variability. That's it.
mm. Are there any other factors that we didn't touch on there that go into
Oh, higher
having the
variability is
higher
influenced by
variability?
everything. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you don't know. So many things can influence higher variability, and it varies a lot. Like it varies all the time. So that's why I said it's definitely, if you're an athlete, it's definitely super helpful, but also don't live out your life by it. I stopped tracking my higher variability. I think it's a great awareness. It's a great awareness tool for people that want to know what habits like influence my nervous system. I mean, HRV tracking is what made me realize, oh, I don't want to drink alcohol. Like this is terrible for me. Like I do not want to drink alcohol. And then notice my difference in mood and different in things. Um, HRV is great for like pregnant mothers. It's great for people that have like illnesses and want to just keep a check on their immune system. So I think there's a benefit, but also I think for people that are obsessed with performance, which that's who I used to be, it wasn't healthy for me because then I would feel like I wanted that A plus, and then when it wasn't A plus, I would kind of like create more stress in my body.
Mm. Do you work with any athletes, or have you worked with any athletes? And how does a daily breathwork practice come into play for somebody who's has a very busy schedule, who's constantly on the move? Asking them to sit down and, do even a few minutes of breath work, like for somebody like me, is like sounds like a
Yeah,
chore, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any testimonies or stories about performance with breath, like incorporating breath work with any athletes.
Yeah. So when I first started my breathwork career, I thought I wanted to work with runners and athletes. So I actually created like this little breathing program. I called it HRV breathing. And I was hosting this class at Squatch like 3 years ago. And I'm going to call forward like every athlete. If you don't have time to sit and breathe for 20 minutes, then there's something that needs to change about your schedule and the way that you're being. Because again, we're just so used to go, 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 do, do, do. And I know that there's urgency in your mission and what you want to accomplish, but then we have the misunderstanding that it's all output, 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 output. Going back to what we initially, our meditation discussion, I realized in my journey that it's actually more about like listening and stillness, and like it's also about cultivating a state more than what we're doing is the state in which you're doing it. It's so different when we're taking action from that state of resource. We actually even make better decisions because when your nervous system's feeling so good and resourced, you're actually taking greater risks. You're going for greater things. So for your athletes, I would say, okay, if 20 minutes is too much time, I would still recommend the nasal breathing, deep belly breath. Again, Google resonant frequency breathing, find your resonant frequency breathing rate. Um, but I would say at least 10 to 15 minutes a day. Another thing for athletes that is super powerful is the gear system. So there's this really good book called Oxygen Advantage that is perfect for athletes. Um, and he talks about, his name is Patrick. I won't try to pronounce his last name. He talks about the different gear systems that we have in our body to perform. So for example, as a runner, I try to, as much as possible, if I'm trying to increase my VO2 max, I'm trying to increase my ability to have CO2 tolerance, meaning like how much CO2 I can hold in my body, I try to keep zone 2 nasal breathing only. Let's say that you're a power lifter and then you're noticing yourself mouth breathing. We all know Huberman has them bunked. Like mouth breathing is the worst thing you can have unless you're like literally sprinting like a panther. Like you're doing like hill sprints or something. That makes sense. So you want to do nasal breathing. And for example, one really simple hack is to do a sharp inhale and then out. So if you want to offset the CO2, sometimes when I'm like doing really heavy workouts or hit workouts, I offset my CO2 instead of going, I go. So you kind of learn how to regulate your breath and it's kind of fun. It's called the gear system. Yeah.
So for somebody who's like a marathoner, who's somebody who's in a race
Yeah.
going hard, I think that's one thing that I've struggled with as a runner myself is like
Yeah.
when my heart rate gets elevated, when I'm doing like 800-meter repeats on the track, or if I'm doing like mile repeats, or I was doing the cap 10K. So you're kind of at just a you're pushing like zone 4, zone 5 for the entire time.
Yeah.
It it felt really hard to try to do that breath that you were just telling me to.
Yeah.
If it's like, "Yo, I'm trying, but I can't," like, are there any other tactics for just trying to breathe more functionally, more optimally during the races? Or is it like
No, and
you should be
yeah, race
practicing.
day, go all out for sure. Like
Okay,
race
gotcha.
day, go all out. But then again, keep in mind that nasal is going to be your most optimal way to perform. Like as
Mm,
much as possible, again, go all out, but also be intelligent with your energy because your respiratory system is going to dictate how your muscles perform and how everything. There's another really good book called EQ. It's EQ pi plus IQ equals a new you. It's super cheesy, but the author's amazing. His name is Ed Harold. He talks all about this. But when you're training, you want to train your respiratory system. So that's why you want to build that CO2 tolerance. So that happens through that nasal breathing. Because guess what? When you're in race day and all that CO2 is built up in your system, your body's used to it. You're used to it. So you're less prone to mouth breathe, if that makes sense. So in training, train that, but then on race day, yeah, go all out. Wherever you gotta breathe, just go and yeah. It's different when you're performing.
mm. I want to go back to what you said earlier about kind of breathing and the immune system and how you were able to not get COVID, not get vaccinated.
Yeah.
And, Wim Hof, you mentioned him. There's the stories of him getting injected with diseases and
Yeah.
him using his own breath to get the disease out of his body. So, what, what is that relationship, the breath with the immune system, and how can you use it to stay
Yes.
healthy?
Give me one second. My computer is too connect. Okay. Yeah, so it's as basic as what we talked about earlier, which is your parasympathetic state is the state in which your body heals. So if you think about when you have an injury or you pull a muscle or you're sick, that's why you got to rest because in that parasympathetic state is when your body actually fights off viruses, fights off all the things. And so um you want to be in your parasympathetic state as much as possible. If you're in sympathetic state, meaning that your body is taking all of its reserves to it's like burning quick gas. It's kind of like your cortisol levels are high, like your reserves are going to perform to hunt the tiger, to run from the tiger, if that makes sense. Versus in your parasympathetic state is when your all the things that support your immunity go up. But anything else beyond that, I would go and talk to a virologist. But it's more about you want to be in parasympathetic state as much as possible.
Mm. And I actually wanted to bring it back to what you said earlier about the athletes, right? And if you don't have 20 minutes, then you need to reevaluate your schedule. Is it, if you only have 20 minutes, say you're committed to that 20 minutes, is it better to do it pre-workout, post-workout, first thing in the morning before you go to bed? Like, when is that best time to do it? And what form of breathing would be the most optimal?
It depends. We all want like that answer of like, what is the breathing pattern? What is the one thing I need to do? Which is why I like to know at least, everyone at least know two types of breathing. And the way I explain it is like you have the fire and you have the water, and you need both of them. You need both elements. Sometimes you need a little bit of fire. Sometimes instead of grabbing a second cup of coffee, I don't drink coffee, but if I were to drink coffee and a second cup of coffee, I'm going to do a little fire breath, a little bit more energizing breath that gives me more energy. That can be kind of like a Wim Hof style breath. um, so my recommendation is first thing in the morning. Like if you were to have any practice, first thing in the morning, because as we all know, when we wake up is when our cortisol levels are the highest. Also, is when your subconscious mind is most active, which being a coach myself, breathwork is a great tool that I have. But really, also, what I'm most passionate about is supporting people stepping into their highest potential and like making the impossible probable. Like that's what lights me up. Um, so that's a lot about our subconscious, working with our subconscious mind. So I like to breathe, to just notice right when I wake up. It's like what is present, and also what do I want to plant into my subconscious. And so I use breathing not only as a performance tool, but then I begin to visualize all the beautiful things that I want to create in my life. I'm visualizing the retreat that I'm hosting, beautiful partner that I'm sharing my life with, the business that I'm building, my parents feeling super healthy. So I like to use that morning practice for that. And again, is when your subconscious is most open. When you're going to bed, I think that's also really helpful for people that tend to have an overactive mind. So for my clients, most of my clients are founders and executives, and they're like working till like 9 p.m., going all out. And they're like, Michelle, I lay down, all I can think about is more work or my to-do list. I'm like, breathe. So that's a great, also it's a great tool for people that think a lot about work before going to bed. And I think that's most entrepreneurs that were just like, oh my God, what's the next thing I need to do? What's the other thing? But for for the morning practice, again, easy, deep belly breaths. That's it. Now, if you want a more energy, for me, it's just a simple. And if you want to get a little fancy, you can add a little breath hold. And when we're doing with breath holds, again, with breath holds, we're getting comfortable with the CO2 that has built in our system. So we do a couple breaths, a couple cycles, a couple cycles, a couple cycles. We create a lot of CO2, and then we hold our breath. And when we hold our breath, similar to people that do deep sea diving, people that go dive underneath the ocean without any tanks, this is what they're doing. They're building the tolerance, the capacity to hold CO2 in their body. And the magic about that is that it makes you more resilient to stress, a better athlete, a better performer, and just kind of like a Zen ninja.
Zen ninja.
Yeah,
Okay,
people are
I
like,
like
Michelle,
that.
you don't get stressed. I'm like, it's not me. It's like it's my nervous system. It's like I can hold my breath for a long time, and I feel like it takes a lot to really get me on edge.
Mm. So you mentioned the subconscious mind a couple of times. For anybody
Yeah.
who's unfamiliar with the subconscious versus the conscious mind, what's the difference?
Okay. So we have the conscious mind, and that is, as I talked about, prefrontal cortex, like everything that we're aware of. We can think about that. Everything that we're aware of, where our decisions, our decisions, our execution. And then our subconscious mind is what we are unaware of. And sometimes it can be emotions, memories, feelings, beliefs that we have suppressed and repressed. So it's that which has, from ages 1 to 7 is where most of our subconscious was imprinted. Actually, this is why I'm really passionate about inner work, because I noticed that with my clients' work, really when I'm working with their subconscious is working with those core memories. Because from ages 1 to 7, we're just deep, where our subconscious is being built. So what happens with the subconscious, more than 85%, and there's different numbers, like let's say 85 to 90% of our decisions today come from our subconscious mind. For example, we all have, like, we consciously know, it's like, let's say we consciously know that we want, I'm going to continue to use the example of the partner. We consciously know I want a partner. But when we look at our life, we're not putting ourselves out there to date. We're self-sabotaging relationships or X, Y, and Z. And so it's like we consciously know something, but at a subconscious level, there's a belief system or a protection mechanism that keeps us from reaching our goals. That could be, if I get into a relationship, I'll experience heartbreak again. Or I'm unworthy of receiving love. Or relationships will, a really common for my founders is relationships will distract me from my work, right? So they think they need to choose either or. So working with your subconscious is really, really powerful. And just to put it full circle, this is why I also love breath work, because it is through breath work that I have been able to rewire and become aware of a lot of my subconscious beliefs. At a deeper level, there's the unconscious. Um, but really it's like the things that we are unaware of that are limiting our growth. And it's all, these things are not bad. They're just have kept us safe. But they're definitely keeping us small.
Mm. And what are the things that we can do each day to reprogram our subconscious mind to make it work for us versus against us?
There's many different things. I would say I'm very biased, but really start with breath work. Why? Because the subconscious also lives in your nervous system. And so your body, we have, maybe for some of the people in your audience have heard the body keeps the score, meaning your body holds the memory of all the, and I'm using the word traumatic, but it doesn't have to be that traumatic. It could be as simple, sometimes we think of trauma, we think of something really heavy, but it could be something as simple as in third grade having your entire class make fun of you because you forgot your pencil or something. And but then you like are so scared as an adult to like raise your hand in a meeting. um so one very simple way is to like, first, how do you access the subconscious? So breath work is a really powerful way of doing that. Meditation is a really powerful way of doing that. um right before you go to sleep or right when you wake up is when that melatonin is helping us enter into that more subconscious unconscious space. So that's why people like Dr. Jody Spencer always talk about Dr. Jody Spencer recommends that you wake up at 4 a.m. But it's like those states right when you wake up or right when you go to bed are perfect for awareness the subconscious. And so what you can do is feed yourself the beliefs and the thoughts that you would like to replace. They need to be somewhat believable, right? So we don't want to leap from the belief that it's hard to make $1 million to I'm going to be a millionaire. It's, you want to kind of like take it bite pieces because you still want to be able to hold the belief in your body and in your mind that there's some level of probability there. I think this is where people miss it, where they try to like leap really high. So taking it in bite pieces, it's what has supported me. And the subconscious mind holds the beliefs, your emotions, your habits, your protective reactions. Um, so, yeah, another great method is hypnotherapy, which in my personal experience, it's been helpful. But for me, breath work is the most powerful. And music. Music is amazing for your subconscious mind. Everything you're listening to is feeding your subconscious mind. I don't listen to any music of any lyrics that I don't want to create in my life. I don't listen music about like toxic love. I don't listen to music about death. I don't listen to music about like, I don't know, when I pay a lot of attention to the music that I listen to, and I just want to feed it good things about abundance, about love, about God, about light, about freedom. Like that's what I want to feed myself.
Yeah, it's so funny you bring that up because that's one thing that I've really, really been focusing on this year is like rapidly taking things off of my like liked playlist on Spotify. So like all the songs, if I go to like my liked songs and I hit shuffle, a lot of times it is like an old rap song that was in there from, several years ago. And it's so interesting that these songs are so popular and so like just mainstream to listen to because maybe they have a good beat or maybe there's good flow or whatever else it is, right? But
Hmm.
when you actually slow down and think about the lyrics and what they're saying and the message that they're talking about and promoting and even more recently, like I've seen all this stuff about I don't listen to Taylor Swift, but there's all these like demonic references in like her new music, which is
Oh,
like
really? I don't listen
crazy.
to her. Yeah,
I don't
I have
either,
no
but
idea. Yeah,
yeah,
those
it's
things, and
crazy.
people like the beat, like that song by Sam Harris that is like na 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 na, that
Hmm.
became so popular, and like you love the beat, but guess what? Like you got to be really mindful of the I think, no conspiracy theories here, but like this is how you move the masses, right? This is how you should really like the real warfare is planting people's planting seeds in people's consciousness. And so you want to like you want to inviting as much light, as much love as possible, even if you love the beat. Because guess what? That emotion, that feeling that you're feeling, it's sending signals to your body and is making it more accessible for you to receive those messages. It's kind of how it works. It's like you like the beat, but then before you know it, the song talks about blacking out on a Friday night, and then you wonder why you're blacking out every Friday night, or going back to the partnership thing, because I was really alive in my heart, it's like all these songs about love are so toxic. It's like, I don't believe in any of this. Like, oh, like you broke my heart, you're worthless, or you cheated, all these things. I'm just like, I'm not gonna listen to any of this. This is not healthy love, right? And I think that's really, really important, because the subconscious mind is rewired through repetition. And how many of us don't listen to a song over and over again because we like the beat, but before you know it, you're thinking about drinking vodka and you haven't even drank in a long time because the song has this thing. That's how media works.
Was there a change for you, or was there like a time where you were just like, like, I shouldn't be listening to this, or like this is
Yeah.
really this is programming my subconscious mind in a way that I don't want to, or was it just a gradual like, ah, I don't know
I,
about this.
I think first it was learning about the subconscious mind. So once you become obsessed with self development, you realize, oh my gosh, okay, and you'll hear all these coaches say it's all about the subconscious, it's all about the subconscious, and especially breathwork practitioners, like it's all about the subconscious. And for sure, it is all about the subconscious, because again, that's where our behaviors and habits come from. One thing that a lot of coaches miss is working with that. It's not just changing the habit. There's a reason why you're not showing up to the habit. So let's get to the root first. For me, the turning point was, okay, let's experiment the opposite. I started to just really clear, it just became aware. I was like, okay, if this is the power of the subconscious, what happens when I feed all these other things? For example, one of the things, as I was becoming a new entrepreneur, transition from tech to coaching, in tech, I had a six-figure salary, and here I was going to get paid to help people to feel their emotions and to breathe. It just felt like such a big flip for me. And my identity, my ego was like, how are you going to make money? You're in danger, whatever else. But then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to listen to only songs that talk about empowerment, about receiving wealth, about succeeding, and of course, like any songs that help me connect with God and my own faith. And wow, like what a shift. To me, it was like a powerful shift of just noticing, like, I'm just in a good mood all the time because this has become my way of being. And for me, it's always been, I've realized that like anytime that then I would switch to another song, now I would kind of get like a little glitch by it. I'm like, oh, even the frequency of it would like bother me. Um, so I think for someone that wants to test it out, that's in your audience, is like really curate. Maybe we'll send them a link on your podcast because I have a couple playlists. It's like just listen to this music for like a full week and see what happens in your life. Because it's crazy. I'm telling you, it's crazy. And I've witnessed it in my retreats, in my breathwork practices. Um, yeah, I think music is the one of the most powerful medicines that we kind of like see like, oh yeah, music's cool, but it's like no, music, it's like it's really powerful medicine that can change your life for the good or for the bad.
How have you created a lifestyle around the things that you love, the things that you enjoy, the things that fill you up, and having a service to others?
It's like similar to you. It's like choose something that you do even if you don't get paid. It's like, what is the thing? Like, doesn't matter an attach of money, of success or labels or, rewards. It's like, what is something that you love to do that helps the world? Because honestly, serving the world feels so good. Like selfishly, just feels good. It's like almost like it just feels so good to know that you impacted someone's life. Is intrinsically in us. We're like kind of designed to serve. And so for me, it's like choosing something that you would do no matter how much you get paid. Um, and then really prioritizing your own nourishment, because I think for a lot of helpers and a lot of people that are of service to others, we can overgive and overdo. And so I realized that in order for me to be of service to others, I got to be my number one priority in terms of like, how am I serving myself? Like, am I treating myself just as I would any of my clients, any of the people that I deeply love, and even better than any of them? Am I my number one person? Um, so when it comes to lifestyle, is building a lifestyle that nourishes me, that everything that I take and do as much as possible, I am not perfect, feels really nourishing, really using the feeling of nourishment and joy as my guiding compass. And same thing with relationships. It's like noticing, it's like which relationships give me a lot of energy and which relationships feel a little bit draining. So it's been more of like using feeling as a guiding compass, nourishing myself, and then choosing something that I would do whether I get paid or not.
Do you have any resources for people that have helped with, incorporating breath work into your into your daily practice, or reprogramming the subconscious mind? Because I don't know, some people are not going to go and just count their breath, right? Like while they go and breathe. It's very difficult. Like
Yeah.
for me, I'm
Yeah.
like, if I'm doing breath work, I like to have it facilitated. I like to, because I can just surrender
Yeah.
to it and kind of just be guided through it. So for anybody who's like interested in all that stuff, do you have any resources on
Yeah.
where they should start?
Yes. I am going to send you a link to a breathwork library that I have, and I'll give your audience access to it. Um, it's 4 simple breathing practices that you can do on your own. I'll guide you. It's your own audio. And that would be my first resource. Other than that, I'm not a huge fan of apps like Calm, or what's the other one? There's another one.
Headspace?
Headspace. Not that that's bad. I think it's a great place to start. We just don't want to be in our phones when we're doing this kind of thing. We just really want to be disconnected. Um, so as much as people may not want to hear this, the resource is to first start by just getting comfortable with sitting on your own in stillness. Like that's the first step. It's small. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel boring. You're going to have a lot of things in your mind come up. But just creating a sacred space, a sacred time where you're creating space for stillness. Over time, it gets easier. So that's kind of what I would say. Um, a book that started me my breathwork journey was The Healing Power of the Breath, and that's from your more like sciencey people that may want to know why should I do breath work. And it's super tiny. The Breath by James Nestor is great. It's just really big, and maybe some people don't want to read the whole thing. But The Healing Power of the Breath by Dr. Richard Brown is a really good one.
Amazing. Michelle, you are an absolute gem. You're an absolute light in this world. I am so grateful for all that you've done in helping me, on my journey and unlocking things from
Yes.
within. And I love to see all the amazing things you're doing around Austin, and the MetaMen
Mm.
retreats, and the upcoming retreat in Costa Rica looks incredible. And you are just somebody who constantly radiates light and helps others around you. And I just want to say thank you, because the world needs more people like yourself. But before I do let you go, I have one final question for you. And it's a question I ask all my guests. And that is, when you hear the words pure ambition, what does it mean to you? And how does it apply to your daily life?
Mm. Um, when I think of pure ambition, I'm thinking of ambition that comes from the soul, from your inner wisdom, from like divine guidance versus like pure. I think of like purity, just like from that place of wholeness versus like I need to achieve in order to feel worthy or be okay or be loved. So I think of that purity. And what was your second question?
How does it apply to your daily life?
Oh, yeah. I'm constantly just being mindful of when I'm reaching for something, where it's coming from, and um prioritizing my inner work. And what that means is like when I notice when I'm reaching for something almost like in a rush mode, like I need to have this, that's a great symptom that my ambition is coming from a place of ego or a need. Otherwise, whatever, if I don't have this, then this means this, then X, Y, and Z means that about me. So I would say being mindful of when I'm like not reaching too hard for like I need this amount of revenue, I need a partner, I need a job, I need to look a certain way. That's really important.
Amazing. Michelle, You are up to some amazing things. If people want to
Thank
connect with
you.
you, if they want more of your resources, if they want to check out
Yes.
more of your stuff, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My Instagram or my website's actually the best. So it's just my full name, micheleflores.com. And then I have a newsletter where I send a free breathwork practice every month with journal prompts and inner work. As I said, I weave in breathwork and inner work so we can integrate it. Yeah.
Amazing. Michelle, thank you so much for all you do. You're a gem.
Gracias.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I wanted to give you all a heads up too that I launched a free community on the Upspace app where you can join, ask me questions, connect with like-minded individuals, follow my 4-week running and strength training program that has some dedicated mobility sessions in there as well, so that we can all optimize our health and fitness together. So if you're interested, head over to the App Store, download the Upspace app, and join the Pure Ambition community today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.